Hey everybody, what is up? It's the Tominator here. So in this one today, I wanted to take a look back at the 2018 Indy Pro that took place last weekend. And this was a show that Steve Kuklo ended up winning. They're on the left. They're just going to jostle these guys around right now. And I'm mainly just going to speak about the top three because they're the only ones that are actually in the frame fully for most of this video clip. So there's Charles Griffin, who just moved in. He ended up in second place, and Luke Sandow there on the right took third. So I have to say it right off the bat that I fully agree with the judges' decisions and their placings for this contest. I know a lot of people were calling robbery or saying that Charles Griffin deserved to win. And first of all, that's a term that is thrown around way too often. I hear it all the time. You see it constantly in comments that this guy got robbed, that guy got robbed. And it's really kind of an annoying thing because it's thrown around way too liberally. I mean, even if you think Charles Griffin deserved this one, there's no way you could call this a robbery. That is just ridiculous. It's so cliche, and it's so melodramatic. So please stop saying robbery, guys. Come on. Anyway, I will say, though, that Charles Griffin looks pretty amazing in this front double bicep shot. I think that he wins this pose because his biceps are by far the best in the picture, and his lats as well. They're the most fully developed, the lowest, and he's kind of filling out the pose better than anybody else. He's just very thickly built, even through the lower body as well. But it has to be said that the reason that Kuklo ended up winning, it simply comes down to a matter of conditioning. I mean, just like pretty much always, it's the guy who's the most dialed in, that's usually going to be your winner. So that's pretty much what happened here. Charles Griffin was holding a little too much water. Steve Kuklo was a little bit drier, a little bit harder. That's why he prevailed. And Luke Sandow there on the right also looked really good, but again, the conditioning wasn't on the level that it needed to be, especially when he turned around. And his coloring was a little off too, so he was getting a little bit washed out. And unfortunately, in a lot of these poses right here, he's not facing head on, so it's difficult to judge the guy properly. So he's not going to look as good as he probably did if he was facing head on. Yeah, I give that one to Charles Griffin, so it's a good start for him, that's for sure. But in the front lat spread, this is a pose where he should really dominate, and I don't think he really is. Because his chest looks a little weak here. I don't know what it is. It just looks kind of flat. It doesn't have the same level of thickness or apparent thickness that Kuklo's is showing. And again, Kuklo just looks a little sharper. He looks a little bit more polished. And that's largely, Kuklo really nailed his coloring. His tan looks the best out of anybody's on stage here. And he definitely was the best conditioned as well. So that's really what kind of propelled him to this victory. Luke Sandow is a guy who's noted for having a great front lat spread, but unfortunately, as you can see, we can't really tell there because he's not facing head on. In the side chest, though, I really like Luke Sandow. He kind of hits it in the more old school fashion, like Arnold or Sean Ray, with the chest propped up a little bit more. And it's nice to see that because most guys hit it more in the modern fashion, like what Kuklo and Griffin are doing there. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just nice to see different variations of the same pose. And I think Sandow's really hitting this one well. I think you could perhaps even give it to him. But then again, Kuklo looks pretty good too. He looks pretty massive. So one complaint I do have of Charles Griffin again is the chest. It's not showing the adequate amount of thickness that I'd like to see. So I consider that a bit of a weak point for him. Not that it's really terrible or anything. It's just not quite as good as, say, what Sandow's showing over there, or even Kuklo, I think. So I think that he's probably falling behind a bit in the side chest compared to those two. But when they turn around, this is where he really makes up some ground. And this is where Steve Kuklo is at his most vulnerable because he's not very good in the back department. I mean, yes, he's the most conditioned still. He's the tightest, but he's just a little small in the back compared to pretty much everybody else on stage here. Luke Sandow's not really in the pose even properly, but look at the two guys on the outside. They're kind of just dwarfing, actually, the guys on the inside. But again, the reason that they ended up placing lower, it simply came down to conditioning. And Charles Griffin, I think, actually looks pretty impressive. He probably would be the winner of this pose because he's got the most thickness and detail through that back, and his arms are very good. He's also got pretty good lower body conditioning. Not on the same level as Kuklo, though. But still, I would probably go with Charles Griffin on that pose. And yeah, they're just going to make him spread out a bit, and we're going to take a look at the rear lat spread now. And this is a pose where I actually think that Kuklo really suffers. So Sandow hits it well. Griffin hits it really well, but Kuklo there just looks very mediocre, very underwhelming. He's totally getting blown out of the water when it comes to the mass factor. I mean, pretty much everybody on this stage looks bigger and wider than him. So he's kind of getting dominated almost in this pose, and it's kind of surprising because he looks pretty big in a lot of the other poses. But here he just doesn't look that good. In the side tricep, he definitely looks better in this one, but then again, Griffin looks pretty good too. His arm looks massive. Luke Sandoz hitting this one very nicely with the calf out. And the guy on the right there, I don't even know his name. Somebody's going to have to remind me, but he's hitting it pretty cool. Like similar how Dorian Yates used to hit it back in the day. Although he's not quite nailing it, he needs to turn to the side a little bit more, but it's an interesting variation of the side tricep. Again, I always like to see that. I like to see guys hitting it in different ways that'll highlight their individual physiques. It's a nice touch. In the ab and thigh, I would probably go with Kuklo on this one, though, simply because he's the most streamlined out of anybody. He has the best waistline. That's another criticism you can level towards Charles Griffin, is that his waist is a little bit blocky. It's a little bit wide. And not as bad as Justin Rodriguez there on the left, who's really spilling over through the obliques. That looks pretty bad, actually. But still, it's just not quite as nice and aesthetic as Steve Kuklo's ab and thigh. Sando looks pretty good as well. In the most muscular, though, this one is pretty interesting because it's very close between Kuklo and Charles Griffin. They almost look like twins here. I mean, they're very comparable. Probably Kuklo's a little bit bigger, a little bit wider perhaps, but Charles Griffin he's packing all kinds of roundness. He's just got bubbles everywhere through the shoulders, the arms. The pecs now definitely look better than they have in some of the other poses, and his traps look very impressive. They're definitely outdoing Kuklo's. Justin Rodriguez there is actually the biggest of the three of them, but again, he's just not quite sharp enough compared to them. And yeah, Sando looks good, but not quite enough separation. So yeah, that's pretty much all for this one, guys. I know it's a bit of a short video. I would have liked to have gone a little bit more in depth, but unfortunately this was the only footage that I could find from this show that was any good that was actually comparing these guys, so it's pretty much all I have to go by. But if you really want to get perspective on the difference in conditioning levels, go check out their individual posing routines where the camera zooms in on these guys more, and you can catch those finer details on Kuklo's physique that you just don't see on anybody else. So he was the clear front runner when it came to that conditioning aspect. And you could really note all the water that Charles Griffin was holding, and that is why he didn't win this show. So, thank you for watching, everybody, and feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.